So welcome everyone, and I'm here today with the lovely Eva Butterly, who is a personal trainer and online coach, and I'm sure much more than that as well, and I'm sure we'll hear all about it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Christine. It's a pleasure to be on the show.
Yeah, really nice. So Eva, you are from Dublin, is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I was born in Louth, which is the county next to Dublin, but I've lived in Dublin pretty much most of my life.
Yeah, lovely. So I would love to hear, there's a lot of things I want to ask you, and there's a few things I came across when I researched a little bit more, which I'm sure you know, there's things that are popping up. But tell us about your scoliosis journey. When was the first time that scoliosis was mentioned to you?
So it first came on the radar, Christine, when I was about 11 years old. I used to play hockey on a girls' team in school, and one of my teachers noticed in a hockey photograph that my shoulders were kind of slumped to one side. Now, I wasn't experiencing any back pain or anything like that. She just kind of noticed that my shoulders were slumped. So my mom brought me to a chiropractor who diagnosed me with scoliosis. But she said that it wasn't anything to be worried about, that she'd be able to fix it, like, with a couple of sessions. So I didn't really think much more about it. I was like 11 at the time. Nobody in my family really knew anything about scoliosis, so we just kind of took her advice. And so I was going to her for about 6 months. Wasn't getting any better, and I kind of noticed in that time that I had developed a really large hump in my back, which seemed to just happen really quickly. So that was like pretty scary as a young girl. So my mom decided to bring me to an orthopedic surgeon. We found out I had severe scoliosis, nearly 100-degree curve in
Wow.
my thoracic spine. I'm not sure what it was in the lumbar. I'd say about 60. But basically, I needed to get emergency surgery because the curve had progressed at such a rapid rate. So in a month of hearing that, had all my blood transfusions done and all that pre-op stuff. And then I received like a 12-hour spinal fusion operation, fused, I believe, from, I think, the first T1, all the way down to L L3, I think. It was basically the full way down my spine.
Hmm.
And then, so I had that done, was recovering from that. It was Harrington rods that was put in. And then within 6 months, the scar on my back started opening up. And there was like kind of like, I don't want to gross you out, but there was like white pus like seeping out of my scar. And I knew that this wasn't normal. We had been like very adamant on like cleanliness with changing the bandages every day and all that. But somehow, anyway, I had got infection in my back. I had to go back in, get a second operation done, get the rods taken out again. And thankfully, I didn't have to get them put back in. What they did was they took the rods out, they put like a cast around my body for like a year after that, just to make sure that everything, like the fusion, stayed in place. That was at age 15, I believe. And thankfully, ever since then, I haven't had any more like scoliosis complications. I've been able to really keep it at bay with exercise, nutrition, and, just living the good life.
Yeah, amazing. So how long, first of all, it must have been one of the last kind of Harrington rod operations, isn't it? Because they don't do that anymore, obviously. And
No,
you don't
no.
look that old. So,
I'm 27, so
right, yeah. So when was that? In the
that would have been
late 90s or something?
2005, I believe.
Oh, yeah, okay, even 2000.
Yeah, I mean, Ireland is a little bit behind in our surgery methods and in that kind of stuff. But yeah, around 2005 was the surgery.
Wow. So how long did it take you to kind of recover or to get back into, well, yourself, I guess is probably the best way to describe it.
I mean, it took a long time, Christine. I won't lie to you. Like I was very sick after, because the methods back then, you know, weren't as kind of advanced and you know, polished as they are today. So it still is a huge operation, but back then it was like a huge chunk of my teenagerhood was taken out because of this. Like I was off school for a year. I had to be homeschooled. Like I spent a bit of time in a wheelchair because I got really fatigued really easily, and I couldn't walk very far. So I'd say with all the surgeries, with like the cast, that was probably about 2 years, I would say, it took me to like fully kind of feel better again.
Wow, that's a long time, isn't it? And then you said, well, exercise obviously has helped you immensely, and I've seen your amazing pictures as well on Instagram. So you do a lot of weight training, isn't it? So how did you get into that?
Well, I never really was a sporty person, Christine. I always kind of had the misconception that doing sports was gonna like injure my back and like, you know, like knock my fusion out of place and this type of stuff. And then it was at age 18 that I I started going to the gym with my brother, and I was starting off doing these like Les Mills classes. So like this kind of like body pump, you know, low weight, lots of reps, you know, high intensity type of work. And I kind of transitioned from that into actually a building style of training where you're working with you know, compound movements. So movements where you're working multiple joints at once, like squats, deadlifts, overhead press, hip thrusts. And it was really my brother who introduced me to all this. He had been weight training himself for some time. He was also a power lifter. So he really got me involved in that world. And I really got into it in a big way because it kind of gave me this confidence that I actually was quite strong, and I could be quite sporty, and that in itself gave me confidence. I always kind of saw myself as kind of like weak and small and petite, and oh, you can't play sports. Like I was never really involved in. I know I said I was on the hockey team in school, but that was kind of like everyone had to be on the team. I was always slagged about being like not a sporty person at all. I was always the small, like girly girl. So yeah, this weightlifting really, really, really empowered me, and also changed my body as well. Made me physically strong. It took away any pain I had, and made me quite mentally strong as well. So yeah, I love weightlifting.
So is that what you, because obviously you work with other people who have scoliosis, is that kind of part of the program, or how exactly do you work with people? Do you give them specific exercises to do, or how does it work?
Well, a general program, now every case is different, of course, Christine, but generally how I'd work with someone with scoliosis is we always start off with compound movements. So movements that work multiple joints at once, because that's going to build up your overall strength, and that's really what we want. Like the goal is to get strong in every area of your body so that you can support your spine, you can stabilize it through having strong muscles to stop your spine from bending or curving any further. But then after that, we look at movements like unilateral movements. So stuff where you're just moving one body part at a time. For instance, if you're doing like a row with a dumbbell and you're just moving one side at a time. Well, with scoliosis, we would always start on the side that's weaker. Generally, it tends to be the side that the curve is protruding out towards. That's been my experience anyway. That side, because the muscles are quite like overstretched there, they tend to be a bit weaker. So we kind of work on really, really strengthening that area, getting it really strong, and then getting the other parts strong as well, but like not necessarily working it to its full potential. We're only trying to make it as strong as the weaker part so that we can try and balance out the imbalance that the curvature is bringing. And then the other part of it as well is trying to like loosen and mobilize the really tight, dense muscles on the other side of the back. So the side of your back that's kind of hollow, some like professionals will call it the concave side. So I kind of think like cave, hollow, tight, dense. That's kind of how I remember it, like in my mind.
Yeah, I think of it as cave, valley side, the valley.
Yeah, totally. That's actually a great way to describe it, because when you kind of feel your back, it does kind of feel like a valley. There's like a lot of like space there.
Yeah, absolutely. So how did you now when I researched you a few days ago, it came up as Games of Thrones actress, it said, and I was like, is that the same Eva Butterly? And I looked at it and I was like, yeah, it must be the same. So you are an actress as well. Or is this like a side job? How does it kind of fit together? How does it kind of how do you combine those two worlds?
So in my past life, Christine, I was a full-time professional actress. That's actually what I wanted to be my whole life. I'd always been on stage, performing, dancing, singing, been in choirs, been in theatre, musicals, all this type of stuff. And then, yeah, I actually studied it in college, drama and performance. And yeah, I was kind of on that path for a long time where I was living in Vancouver. I was auditioning for film and TV. And yeah, I got lucky and landed some roles, like a small part in Game of Thrones and that. And then, I don't know, I'm the type of person who I like to try my hand at many things. So back then where I was at, that's what I really wanted to do. And then as time progressed on, I started kind of losing interest in it somewhat. I felt like, I guess I kind of felt like I'd done everything I wanted to do with it and my passion for it had gone. So then I don't know, I got really obsessed with like bodybuilding, and I had been doing like weightlifting all this time, but more so as a hobby. But then I became really passionate about like helping other people get strong and improve like their mental and physical fitness as well. So I guess I'm just like the type of person, I just like trying different things, like throwing different balls up into the air and just kind of like going with where my interest currently is.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely completely relate to that. I mean, I'm a little bit older than you, but yeah, there's definitely a lot of different things that I have tried in your life, and you kind of have to do a few things to know what you don't want, isn't it? And then you kind of slowly you move into the direction that kind of fulfills you a little bit more, isn't it? And
Absolutely, yeah. I think if you're, a creative person, you don't feel fulfilled until you've kind of like sparked your curiosity in these particular things. And as you said, you find out what you do like to do and what you don't like to do. But if you never try it, then you never know.
Absolutely, absolutely. So tell us about the podcast. So you've got a podcast called Scoliosis Warriors, is that right? Um,
Um,
how did you? Well, first of all, why did you start it, and how did you come up with the name?
so I was working with my good friend Brian Keane. He is my business mentor, and he has a really popular podcast called the Brian Keane Fitness Podcast. It's one of the most like downloaded health and fitness podcasts in Ireland. And he was telling me, like I was saying, oh, should I do YouTube? What should I do? Like because I knew I wanted to give back to the scoliosis community somehow, but also as it's a good way of marketing and advertising.
Hmm.
And he was saying like, well, the world is getting busier now. People don't have as much time on their hands, so podcasts are ideal because you can listen to it while you're doing another activity. So he said, I think it would be a good idea for you to set up a podcast. So that was really how I came to do it. And the scoliosis part came from I kind of I think scoliosis warrior has been a term that's been around for a while, but it just kind of fell in line with what my kind of purpose was, is like being very strong, not only physically but mentally as well, and being brave and courageous. But then having scoliosis as well is just like you could attach any condition to that. You could say cystic fibrosis warrior, you could say cancer warrior, or just even just a warrior who gets up every day and does something that really scares themselves. So yeah, I suppose the podcast is not just for people with scoliosis, but it's anyone who's kind of facing a battle in their life, and they're brave and they're able to overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've listened to a few episodes, and it's yeah, it's you always have somebody interesting, and I think you've done a few episodes on your own as well, isn't it, where you talk about your expertise. I've heard one about nutrition, which was great. And then you have some surgeons on there as well. Is that right? I didn't listen to those, but I saw the couple of names on there.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough actually to get a couple of really cool people on the podcast. I recently had the surgeon, Dr. Damien McCormick, who performed my own surgeries back in the day, which was really coming full circle, like going from, being in his care many, many years ago to now talking as peers on my podcast about scoliosis. So it's really funny how life comes full circle like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what are some tips you could give us if we want to start kind of strengthening, or start kind of taking care of ourselves a little bit more? And if you, for example, somebody who is maybe like you were saying, I don't want to injure myself doing sports. What would you say to somebody like that? How, what are some tips you could give us?
Well, first of all, I like to kind of change people's mindset into thinking like I know probably a lot of people have told you this, but you're a lot stronger than you think you are. Like, even if you have spinal fusion, like that metal is fused to your spine. That means it is not going anywhere. I know there are some adverse cases where it does happen, where you hear of like things popping off and that, but that is a very, very, very small population of people. And you normally hear about those stories because they are they are unusual and out of the blue. But for most people, for the general population, you are very, very strong, and you can afford to train hard. I'm not saying like be a complete idiot about it. Like if you're starting off, yes, I do think you should get a personal trainer, buy a block of sessions with them, just so you learn proper form and you learn how to lift weights properly. But don't be afraid to challenge yourself a little bit. I find a really good way of doing it is just increasing weights a tiny little bit every week. So if you are doing like, 2.5 this week, well, maybe next week do 5. And the week after that, if 5 is still heavy for you, well, challenge yourself by doing 1 extra rep. But by doing this, you're not overloading your body, but you're still giving it the stimulus in which to grow muscle. It doesn't have to be this big thing where you're like suddenly like challenge yourself to this weight that's unfathomable. Like it only has to be tiny little increases consistently over time, and that will eventually get you strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very so I'm not, I hate going to the gym. I will have to admit that.
I love your
It's like
honesty.
my least favorite place probably in the world. I've always been put off by, just the whole environment, and you see people going like this, and I always find there's a lot of ego attached to it. I'm saying this now. However, I've kind of, with my yoga practice especially, I've gone kind of more down the softer route in a way, but I feel like strengthening really, really complements a yoga practice. So this is my recent discovery.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I feel like yoga is an amazing way to like really go internally and develop that self-awareness. And I feel like that's very much like a feminine quality, whereas getting strong and growing muscle is it can be quite like a masculine thing as well. And I think to balance them out, you need like a little bit of both. So I need a little bit of what you have, Christine, and you need a little bit of what I have, and that's
Yeah.
what makes us balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I think it's so great to connect with others, who are in the same boat, more or less. I mean, we all have different challenges, obviously, and just kind of exchange ideas, isn't it? And we all have different approaches, but ultimately the goal is the same. So,
Yeah, I think even though we come from different viewpoints, like our values are the same, our intentions are the same. We all want the best for people that we work with and to make their lives better in some way. And I think when you're coming from that perspective, you can never really go wrong.
yeah, absolutely. So
Hmm.
yeah, I've recently got myself some weights, reluctantly.
How's it going for you?
Yeah, it's going all right. It's it's a completely, as I said, it's a completely different approach, and the whole like repetitions. Obviously, we don't really do that in yoga. So we work with breath, and we work with um, more static holds rather than repetition. There can be sometimes more repetitions, but it's generally not the same approach. But I've definitely felt, so I've been working with some weights and then with Pilates as well. So I'm definitely not a purist. I wouldn't say, and I think yoga is more of a way of life, and it can incorporate lots of different things. So I don't feel like I'm cheating on my yoga practice or something if I try other things. And it's really, really helped me to kind of piece myself together a little bit more. So a little bit more there, as you say, it's a little bit more of that masculine energy as well, in a good way.
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I think having a balance of all of them, and like Pilates is amazing as well. Like one thing I didn't mention in the training was like the importance of having like a very, very strong core when you have scoliosis. That's probably actually the most important to prevent lower back pain. And Pilates is great for that. Oh my gosh, I couldn't think of anything better for helping with your core stabilization.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yes, you need that balance, isn't it? You need a little bit of everything, and then you can work with that, and then overall feel just a little bit taller.
Yeah, find what works for you. Like, so for you, you do mostly yoga, but you incorporate some other stuff as well because you know it's going to benefit your scoliosis in the long term, and that's great. That's it's great to really be self-aware of what you enjoy doing, but incorporating the things that you know are good for your body too.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you could travel back in time, let's say about, you're 27 now, isn't it? So let's say 10 years, and you could meet the Eva from 10 years ago. What advice would you give her? What would you tell her now?
Oh, that's a good question. Um, I would probably tell her to just have a little bit more belief in yourself. You don't always have to second guess yourself. Usually, your intuition or listening to your gut is always right. You know, you can get lots of different advice off people, and you'll end up no better than you were before. You'll probably actually end up more confused. But if you really start to like take a quiet moment and just ask yourself the question, you will get a feeling in your gut of whether that feels good or whether it doesn't feel good. And that has really guided me very well. I found any decisions I've made that haven't come from my gut have come from me listening to other people, have not always been the right one or the best one for me. So I'd say to anyone out there, just listen to yourself a bit more. You know, you can learn off other people, but you generally always know what's best for you.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And for those who who might be facing this decision of, obviously you were very young when you had your first surgery, so you probably didn't have much say about it, I would imagine. But what would you say to somebody who's maybe just facing this decision to have surgery or not? I mean, for you, obviously, there wasn't another way, I guess. It was there wasn't much of a decision. But what would you say to someone who's maybe who's been given the choice?
Well, I would say look at all options first. I think you briefly touched on this, but you know, seek out different opinions and get different viewpoints off people. There's a lot of groups online now of people who have been through surgeries, who have done trot therapy, who have been in body casts. So ask them how their experience has been. Surgery is a forever thing. It's not really something that you can reverse. So you have to think about, if you get your spine fused, it's going to be that way when, you know, like all things good. It's going to be that way when you're very old, when you're 70 or 80. So you have to consider how your spine is going to age with that. So really be really informed on all points, like educate yourself, and then from that, when you have all that information gathered together, then do a gut check. After that, do a gut check, feel what feels good to you at that moment. It might change. like, you know, things are constantly changing in movement, but get all your ducks in line first.
That's lovely. Really good advice. Thank you so much. How can people get in touch with you if they want to know more about you or maybe work with you?
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, they can always reach out to me via Instagram. My name is at Eva Butterly. Or if you are on Facebook, my name is Eva Butterly Fitness.
Okay, lovely. Eva Butterly Fitness, and I will link to all of that as well in the description. Thank you so much, Eva. It's really, really good to chat with you. Really good to get your wisdom and your insight.
Thank you so much, Christine. Absolute pleasure to be on today.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.